What's going on YouTube? Or Storm here coming at you guys with another video today. Now, today I'm going to be doing another Know Your Ruling series. I felt like these three things would be pretty relevant to cover considering we did have the emergency ban list as a few days ago. I felt like these three topics will be the Monarch Stormforth explaining how it works, how it's ruled, and because especially with Monarchs being more relevant because the hits to mages and pals and the structure deck coming out last week. I'm going to talk about Chimeratech Fortress Dragon and why you cannot use Chimeratech, how Chimeratech works, how you cannot use it against, and why you can't use it against pendulum monsters. I'm going to talk a little bit about damage step and what you can and cannot activate during a damage step. So first off, we're obviously talking about Monarch Stormforth. So when this card first came out, I believe it was in Duelist Alliance. God, it's been almost 2 years now, but Duelist Alliance, this card was one of the most confusing cards I think I've ever read in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because most of the time you have card effects and summoning and conditions, and the fact that Stormforth sets a condition that affects the monster, that kind of boggles your mind for a second. So a lot of people said, oh, you can tribute towers to Stormforth. No, you can't. And it was one of the most confusingly ruled cards. But in summary, that's basically how Stormforth works. When you activate Monarch Stormforth, it activates a condition that affects all your opponent's monsters that you contribute them as if you control them. Basically is a condition that affects the monsters. So say you have a Dark Law out and your opponent activates Monarch Stormforth. You can, if you have a set Forbidden Lance, you can chain Lance in response to the activation of Monarch Stormforth, and your Dark Law cannot be tributed because unaffected by the effects of spells and traps. That includes the condition that Monarch Stormforth sets forth. However, if you have a second monster out, say you have two monsters out, but you Lance one, your opponent can simply tribute the other one. So that's something very, very key to remember about Monarch Stormforth. The other reason that makes this card so good is the fact that it does not target, and it tributes the monster, which means they will not get their effects. There's a lot of monsters that just float in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think, especially since Duelist Alliance, we have a lot of monsters that float. Right now, I'm thinking of the Cosmo ships. You're thinking of the Yazi is a great example of a card. There's a lot of these cards that can't be targeted, that float, and that's what makes Monarch Stormforth so good, is it tributes them so they do not get their effects. It does not destroy them, it tributes them as if you controlled them. So, in summary, I think that does a good job explaining what Stormforth does. So if some guy tries to say you can't tribute, tries to activate their floating effects when you Stormforth them, you understand why it does not. You understand that when your opponent Stormforth and you have one monster out, you can chain Lance and that monster cannot be tributed. So it's a kind of a key little thing to remember about Monarch Stormforth. I'm going to be saving periodically the video to make sure the end doesn't shut down. So the second thing I want to talk about is this card, which is called Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. This card has come a little bit more relevant because for Cosmos, it's one of the ways you can again get over the Cosmos ships. So what Chimeratech does is it's special summoned by sending a Cyber Dragon monster and any machine type monsters you or your opponent controls to the graveyard. Because it has to send to the graveyard, the way the pendulums work, you cannot use Chimeratech Fortress. You cannot summon Chimeratech Fortress Dragon via pendulum machine type monster. So if your opponent say has a Dynamis monster out, you cannot contact to use into Chimeratech with those because the way pendulums work, because they can't be sent to because they get destroyed, then go to the extra deck. They can't be physically sent to the graveyard. So you cannot use Chimeratech Fortress Dragon on Pendulum monsters. However, it is one of the best surefire ways to get over, especially if you're playing heroes, because one of the cool things you can do with heroes, you can search, like I've said this in previous videos, you can search Elemental Hero Prismas, use Prisma's Effectus and Cyber Dragon, and then contact fuse with your opponent's monsters. It's a really cool way to get over your opponent's field. The key thing to remember is with Despots getting a few more new cards, you probably need Chimeratech is also one of the best ways. It is a contact fusion, which means since it sends them to the graveyard, meaning it doesn't destroy them, it sends them. It reads a lot like Darkened Dragon and Black Sheep of Corn. That means that this card will also prevent their effects from triggering, which is really, really key. In summary, Chimeratech Fortress Dragon cannot be used on Pendulum monsters because the way the mechanic works, because they get returned to the extra deck upon being destroyed, you cannot physically send them to the graveyard. Chimeratech also, it prevents, much like Stormforth, it prevents cards like Cosmo Dark Destroyer from triggering because they're being sent to the graveyard, and they aren't being destroyed. So, and the last thing I wanted to talk about is damage step. One of the toughest lessons I had to learn in Yu-Gi-Oh is when I really started to get more competitive in the game. I was playing against mermails. I was playing a lot against mermails, and mermails like really taught me a lot about the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, because I remember every time I would destroy a Lind, and he'd be like, I activate this. No, you can't do that. It's damage step. No, you can't do that because it's damage step. Basically, what damage step is whenever the monster is destroyed, there are a lot of things you cannot do during damage step. I summarize it like this: the only things that can be activated during damage step is something that modifies damage, or something that modifies attack and defense, or something that negates something. So a great example of the first thing is something like Forbidden Chalice. Chalice is becoming a little bit more popular. It was good. It was one of the things people cited against Shaddolls because you could prevent their flip effects from triggering, which was really key. Early on with Shaddolls, Chalice was really good because you could also chain it. You could chain it after they flip face up because it modifies attack and defense. It's one of the surefire ways, pure ways you could prevent their flip effects from triggering. Another thing so there are other similar cards that also includes trap cards and monster effects. A good example of a trap card would be something like Clipper Launch. Clipper Launch modifies attack and defense, so you can chain it during damage step. A monster example is Raid Raptor Satellite Cannon Falcon with Wing Raiders right around the corner. That card actually does modify attack and defense. You can actually chain it after Honest, which is a really cool little thing. But that's a kind of a valid lesson you have to learn. Is that a great example of something that negates something is one of my favorite cards is Stardust Dragon. Stardust Dragon is negates something. Good example is I remember I learned this early on. I had a Stardust out attacked in someone's hand, and I was playing Dev Pro at the time. I was like, attack a Stardust, and he tries to activate. This is during hat form. It tries to activate Fire Hand, and I triggered Stardust effect to negate it. And I was like, oh, I can actually activate Stardust during damage step, which you can, and it also, so a good example is say there's a card effect like not Dark Destroyer, but like there's a lot of card effects in Yu-Gi-Oh that do destroy, and even if they trigger during damage step, your opponent cannot do that. Great example is again Mermails. Say your opponent brings out a Pike with Lind, and then they trigger the effect of Pike to pitch an infantry. You can negate the infantry's effect, even though it is during damage step. There's a lot of other great examples right now. Solemn Strike, Debunk is a great example. Typically, these cards are locked into counter traps or monster effects. There's not a lot of other than Chalice. Chalice kind of blurs both lines, but they're basically, I think, in summary, you have to understand that damage step is a thing, so you don't want your opponent to try to flip emptiness on you during damage step because they can't. And a lot of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually do say now, since I think 2011 or something, Konami is actually printing cards with problem-solving card text, so it kind of clears these things up for you anyways. So anyway, guys, as always, I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video today. Let me know what you guys think about these this Know Your Ruling series, and I'd definitely like to continue it if you guys enjoy it. And anyway, guys, as always, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Storm signing out.